Let's start with the next most common form of street aggression. One- and two-handed grabs, what we used to call lapel holds back when people had lapels. There's a lot of them, and they cover a whole spectrum of levels of force. Someone may just put their hands on you to try to intimidate you, all the way up to somebody holding you in place while they use a weapon on you. So we're going to look at both low-level threats and higher-level ones. Let's begin with the lowest level threat. Someone grabs my lapel with one hand. He's standing here fairly relaxed. Maybe you're in a club or some kind of social setting. I don't want to make a scene. I just want the guy to let go of me. The benefit of this situation is there isn't a lot of forward and back pressure. He's more or less static. Remember, that's fairly rare in the real world. Although everybody trains it this way, it's really uncommon that someone is just standing there and not pushing you or pulling you. In this situation, I just want the guy to let go. The simplest way is to attack his thumb. The thumb is the weakest point of his grip. Squeeze tight. Instructional way, the way I teach people in class to understand the leverage is to use your fingers and your thumb. So my thumb goes over the tip of his, I use my fingers here, and I have a simple push-pull motion, like this. It looks a little easier than it really is because you got to get the angle right, but it doesn't take much practice. The most common mistake is people are going to put pressure on the wrong spot, right on his knuckle here. Doesn't do anything, does it? So you can see from a technical point of view, jiu-jitsu really is the art of inches. If I'm even an inch off here, I'm not putting any pressure on it. So it's important to learn this first using this method because you have better sensitivity with your fingers. I want to slide my thumb down to the end of his, push it in and up, and at the same time these fingers here are pulling in. It's really simple. Now once you get that down and you understand where you're applying the pressure, the best way to actually do it is to use your whole hand. The difference is I have to catch his thumb here in the pad of my thumb, and I don't have the same kind of tactile sensitivity, so I'm going to need to practice this way first. You got to catch his thumb here in the pad of your hand. Same push-pull principle, except I'm using the strength of my whole hand and forearm to squish the thumb. This is one of the simplest ways to break a grip. It's really, really simple, really efficient, doesn't take a lot of strength. Perfect thing to teach your kids, wife, girlfriend, whatever. The only problem is it's fairly fine motor, meaning I have to get specifically on a small spot on his thumb. So if there's any movement, if he starts to move me around more, this becomes problematic. So let's look at it as we go up the force level. If there's only a little bit of movement, maybe he's just shaking a little bit or he's talking with his hands and there isn't a lot of physically jostling me about, I can kind of hold it in place with the second hand. I may have to base more myself. Everything else is the same. To learn it, use it this way. To actually break the thumb off, do it that way. The next problem arises, however, when he's really starting to move me around a little bit more. Now there's a lot of different defenses we can do, but we're on the topic of just breaking this grip. People give you advice like, just run away. Well, the guy's got a hold of me. Unless I peel off my jacket, I may not be able to run away. I have to be able to break this hold first. So the next way to do this is to use a slicing motion against the thumb. I don't have to specifically know where the thumb is. Let's take a look at this one more in detail. What I'm going to do is grab right below his hand on my own lapel. This takes the slack out. Then I can look at him, I can look somewhere else if there's a multiple opponent situation going on, and I don't physically have to feel his thumb because I'm going to use my own jacket seam to guide my hand down. So by making a knife hand like this and sliding it down my jacket, I'm going to run into his thumb. It's there, hold tight. When I make contact, I just peel it off like that. This method actually evolved for gi versus gi fighting in tournament jiu-jitsu, since technically you're not allowed to grab the fingers of the thumb to break grips. It's considered small digit manipulation. But doing it this way is still within the rules because I'm not grabbing his thumb. And it also works really efficiently for these situations where there's more movement, I'm slightly off balance, and I don't want to, or I can't physically grab his thumb. It's too small a target in the context of the greater force he's using on me. All right, let's go to the next situation. We're moving up the force ladder. He's got a hold of my jacket again. This time he's moving me around more, and it's more problematic. I certainly can't try to grab his thumb like this. What we want to do in these situations is simply break the grip. We're not trying to lock the guy. We're not trying to control him. We're trying to break the grip so I can get away, deploy a weapon, use a striking tactic, whatever. So in this situation, it's more natural for me to grab with my far hand. If there's a lot of movement in here, it's difficult like this. I'm going to use my far hand to grip underneath his hand, and I'm going to use a stronger mechanical motion. I'm going to use my whole arm to break this grip. So at this moment, when my elbow makes contact with his wrist, I'm going to pull this way with my right hand and this way with my left hand. It's really simple to break a grip like that. And if he's holding tight, it's going to hurt his fingers. Now, it looks like I'm just using strength here, but what's actually happening is my elbow is making his wrist bend like this. And as his wrist bends, his fingers become weaker. So the closer I am to his hand with my elbow, the more efficient this is going to be. If he's really huge and he's got arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger on him, if I start hitting on his forearm and stuff like this, it's going to have less chance of working. And all I'm doing is yarding this out of his fingers. It may work, it may not, depending how strong I can pull here. But if I get his wrist bent and I combine these motions, it's really simple and really efficient, and you can rip off even the strongest person's grip off your jacket. Why? Because I'm not dealing with the strength of his arm. I'm trying to minimize his grip to this point, and when the wrist bends, the more it bends, the weaker his grip becomes because the fingers start to spread, and it's a relatively easy thing to pull your jacket or your hoodie or whatever out of there. So again, it's not just the force of my elbow, it's the fact that my elbow is making his wrist bend. And I use two-way action, left and right. That's a really fast one. I'm here, the guy grabs me. I see his buddies coming to run. I don't have time to try and do a joint lock on here. I just want to get out of there, and that's one of the simplest, most efficient ways to do that. The martial arts are full of wrist locks. They're popular, but most of them don't really work very well in the real world. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we have a couple, but they're not my favorite part for the same reasons. The one I'm going to show you here is my personal favorite. It's not a standard part of most self-defense curriculums. It's usually used in a competitive setting. The only disadvantage is you need to have a jacket on or something thick that you're wearing to use it as a third hand. It's a lot tighter than the traditional ones, and I think this evolved in competition jiu-jitsu, trying to catch a guy while he was fighting for grips during the throwing phase. If you're able to catch a trained guy with a wrist lock and finish him with it, it has to be a lot tighter than a lot of the more self-defense oriented ones. So the scenario is the same. He's going to grab me here. Let's look at this reinforced wrist lock. I'm going to grab below his hand so I can feed it to my cross hand. Grab thumb up. This allows me to line up the thumb side bone of my forearm. I want to make sure I'm using the bone of my forearm here. If I let my wrist bend and use the flat of my forearm like this, there isn't much pressure, is there? I need to grip so that this bone goes across the bend of his wrist. So I grip thumb down as close to his hand as possible. So from the moment I grip, that's why my thumb is down, I need that thumb side bone digging into his forearm like this. I use my second hand to augment that, and then I start basing out to put more pressure. Do you see how more painful that gets just by me dropping my weight? This is the importance of having balance. Now by augmenting this in, putting a small wrist twist inward and twisting my hips, I can break his wrist right off. It's a lot worse on his hand getting twisted this way, side to side, than it is up and down. Why? Because there's not as much slack in the joint there. So you're making an actual twisting break like that. That's really, really painful. It'll probably be a nasty break, and I can throw him with that, put him on the ground, or get into a bargaining position.